You clicked on this video because you're looking for somewhat of a roadmap that can lead you into digital illustrations. Well, you're welcome because that's what this video is all about. My name is Ufo Tubon. I'm an illustrator and a designer. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about somewhat of a roadmap into digital illustration. This video is going to be divided into 4 different sections. The first section, we are going to explain what digital illustration is, basically the 2 kinds of digital illustrations as I like to personally call them. In the second section, we're going to be talking about the basic tools that are needed to get into digital illustrations. And in the third section, I'm going to be sharing some tutorials and some channels on YouTube that has helped me grow as an illustrator. And the fourth section, which is my favorite, I'm going to be sharing with us tips that can help you grow as an illustrator. Without further ado, let's get into the video. For the purpose of this video, I'd like to divide digital illustrations into 2 kinds. The first would be vector illustrations, which are also called product illustrations, and the second would be character design, which can also be called comic book illustrations. Vector illustrations are those illustrations that, should you scale them larger than their original size, they do not lose any physical properties. Basically, they are made up of shapes, curves, and anchor points. And you can achieve such illustration by using software like Adobe Illustrator, Vectornator, and even Figma. While character designs and comic book illustrations are basically those raster and pixelated illustrations. Should you scale them larger than their original size, they lose physical properties. They basically become blurry, they get pixelated. And these kind of illustrations consist of line art, brush strokes, and textures. And you can achieve such illustrations by using software like Photoshop, Krita, Medibank, or even Procreate with the iPad. As someone who can actually do both kind of illustrations, I've come to realize that vector-based illustration seems to be quite rigid compared to character designs. And I think a contributing factor to this also is the software that are used in rendering these illustrations. Now, it is important to keep in mind that sometimes when brand and client reach out to you, they may not necessarily know what kind of illustration they will need for their project. So, as an illustrator, understanding the 2 kinds of illustrations would help you navigate better and explain to the client or brand which illustration style is needed for the project. Let's talk about the tools you need to get into illustration. There are basically 3 tools that are needed to get into digital illustration, and the first would be a computer. Basically, I personally recommend any laptop that has at least a 4 gig RAM and a 16 processor. Any computer within these specs or even higher specs should suffice. The second tool you'd be needing is a digital tablet, and this can range from a non-display graphic tablet or a displayed graphic tablet or even down to an iPad. Speaking of the iPad and the Apple Pencil, it is important to note that the Apple Pencil does not come with the iPad. It's an accessory you have to purchase separately, and the ability to draw doesn't also come with purchasing the iPad. I think that's pretty obvious. Now, if you're completely low on budget, one tool I would recommend that almost everybody should already have is the pencil and paper, where you can sketch on, then scan with your phone, then export into your laptop to draw digitally. And the third tool you will be needing is a digital software, which can range from Photoshop down to Adobe Illustrator, down to Krita, down to Vectornator, even down to Figma. And some of these are actually free. Still on the software part of things, there's Procreate, which is strictly available only to the iPad. Actually, there's Procreate Pockets for the iPhones, but that's a whole different story. For the non-display graphic tablet, I can personally recommend 2 because I have personally used them before. The non-display graphic tablet I would recommend is the Huion H640p. That was actually my very first graphic tablet when I started digital illustration. And if you can raise your budget up a little, still on the non-display graphic tablet, I would recommend the Huion S611. A very important factor to note about the non-display graphic tablet, you need to have a good hand-to-eye coordination while working with these graphic tablets. And the reason is because you would actually be looking at your screen, your laptop screen, while you're drawing on your tablet. So you need good hand-to-eye coordination. I can already assure you, if you're just starting out, it will be very difficult for the very first few weeks, but when you constantly practice, you'd quickly adapt to it. If you're getting value from this video, kindly hit the like button so YouTube can recommend to more creatives like yourself. And this would be a good time to consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Let's talk about some of my favorite YouTube channels on where you can get tutorials. For vector illustrations, one YouTube channel that I really enjoy their content and I recommend a lot is the Gigantic Community. I love how they explain illustrations and how they show the basic forms and the basic shapes that they use in creating one big gigantic illustration. And for character designs or comic book illustrations, I would always recommend Muhammad Agbadi's YouTube channel, Bobo Illustration YouTube channel, and there are lots more actually. I'm going to leave links to these channels in the description below. One key advice I always share to aspiring illustrators is the fact that much more than you study illustration, you actually have to practice illustration, because you would heavily be able to measure your growth by how much you practice and not how much you study. Let's get to my favorite part of the video. Tips to become better illustrators. And the first would be to practice. You really have to practice. Practice, practice, practice. The second tip I would share is to follow like-minded illustrators. Look out for illustrators who are already doing the kind of illustrations you would want to do and follow them. Ask them the right questions. Study their works. If you need help, respectfully reach out to them and ask for help. The third tip I would give is to give yourself time to grow. Digital art takes time. Digital illustrations takes time. It takes time to learn the pen tool. It takes time to create good hand-to-eye coordination. It takes time to draw the hand. It takes time to draw the nose. So give yourself time to grow. You probably will not be an expert in just 3 months of doing illustrations. You have to give yourself time to grow. And the fourth point would be to share your work. Now, this part is where most aspiring artists struggle the most, especially because they feel the illustrations is not good enough, to which you may be correct. But then if you do not share your work, you may not necessarily get feedback from seasoned and veteran artists that can help you grow along the way. Share your work. You can even tag some of these artists to give you feedback on what they think about the color choice or the brush strokes or whatever it is, but basically just share your work. I hope you gained value from this video. If you did, kindly hit the like button so YouTube can recommend this video to more creatives, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already.